In the blistering heat of a Dallas summer, Maria Delgado stood outside the chain-link fence of the South Texas Detention Center, clutching a crumpled photograph of her daughter, Sophia. The 12-year-old's gap-toothed smile was a fading memory, now replaced by the gnawing fear that Sophia was somewhere inside, caught in the gears of a system Maria barely understood. 2 weeks ago, ICE agents had knocked on their door at dawn, their badges glinting like knives in the early light. Sophia, a U.S. citizen born in Houston, had been swept up in a raid targeting her mother, an undocumented Honduran who'd lived in Texas for 15 years. Maria had begged to keep Sophia with her, but the agents cited protocol. Sophia was a minor, and her mother's deportation meant she'd go too. Now Maria was out on bail, fighting a legal battle she couldn't afford, while Sophia was somewhere beyond the fence, maybe already on a bus to Honduras, a country Sophia had never known. Across town, in a sleek office overlooking the Dallas skyline, Reppers Jasmine Crockett sat at her desk, her phone buzzing with notifications. Her latest Instagram video had gone viral, again. The clip, where she'd called out Republicans for voting down an amendment to protect U.S. citizens from deportation, had racked up millions of views, but the comments were a battlefield. Conservative accounts like End Wokeness were tearing into her, accusing her of hypocrisy for sympathizing with deportees while ignoring the border crisis. Her allies, like Reps Eric Swalwell and Pramila Jayapal, had stood with her in the video, their faces grim as they decried the GOP's push to fund President Trump's mass deportation plan. But the backlash was relentless. Other countries have been throwing people into our country for decades, Reppers Crockett, one Republican congressman, had posted. Another called her a never-ending campaign ad. Jasmine rubbed her temples, the weight of her words sinking in. She'd meant to shine a light on cases like Sophia's, a U.S. citizen caught in the crossfire, but the internet had turned it into a meme. Jasmine hadn't planned to be the face of this fight. A first-term congresswoman from Texas, she'd entered politics to advocate for her community, not to spar with trolls or dodge death threats. But her fiery rhetoric, calling out Governor Greg Abbott's policies or slamming Elon Musk's influence, had made her a lightning rod. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the framed photo of her grandmother on her desk. "Speak truth, even when it hurts," her grandmother used to say. Jasmine had taken that to heart, but now, with Sofia Delgado's case file open on her laptop, she wondered if her words were enough. The girl's story had hit her hard, a child born on American soil now facing exile because of a policy Jasmine couldn't stop. The Republicans' budget bill, packed with $46.5 billion for a border wall and 20,000 new ICE officers, was moving through Congress like a freight train. Jasmine's amendment to bar ICE from deporting citizens had been crushed, and the vote had left her shaken. "They just voted to give Trump the legal ability to deport U.S. citizens," she'd said in the video, her voice trembling with rage. She wasn't lying, but the truth felt like a losing battle. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in El Paso, ICE officer Daniel Carter sat at his kitchen table, his badge resting beside a half-empty coffee mug. At 34, Daniel had spent a decade enforcing immigration laws, but the new directives under Trump's second term were testing him. The plan was ambitious: deport 1 million immigrants annually, detain 100,000 at a time, and build a wall that stretched like a scar across the border. Daniel wasn't a hardliner. He joined ICE to catch traffickers and cartel members, not to split families. But orders were orders, and the Delgado case had landed on his desk. Sophia's file noted her citizenship, but the policy was clear. Minors went with their parents, no exceptions. Daniel had processed dozens of cases like hers, but this one stuck with him. He'd seen Sophia's drawing of a house with a red roof, tucked into her mother's belongings when they were detained. It reminded him of his own daughter's sketches, pinned to the fridge behind him. Daniel's phone pinged with a news alert. Reppers Jasmine Crockett was trending again, her video blasting the GOP's vote. He watched it, his jaw tightening as she accused Republicans of kidnapping folk and violating rights. Daniel didn't vote. He'd seen too much to believe in politicians, but Crockett's words stung. He wasn't kidnapping anyone, he was following the law. Still, he couldn't shake the image of Sophia's drawing. Last week, he'd overheard a colleague joke about deporting anchor babies to Honduras. Daniel had stayed silent, but the comment gnawed at him. He glanced at the clock. His shift at the detention center started in an hour. Maybe he'd see Sophia today. Maybe he'd have to look her in the eye. Back in Dallas, Maria Delgado sat in a cramped legal aid office, her hands trembling as she recounted her story to a young lawyer named Aisha Khan. Aisha, a first-generation Pakistani-American, had taken Maria's case pro bono, driven by her own family's immigrant roots. The law was a maze. Maria faced deportation unless she could prove extreme hardship, and Sophia's citizenship offered no automatic protection. Aisha had read about Crockett's amendment and its failure, and she'd watched the Congresswoman's video with a mix of admiration and frustration. Crockett was right to call out the injustice, but her rhetoric wasn't helping Maria's case. The courts didn't care about viral clips. They cared about precedent, and the precedent was brutal. Aisha pulled up Sophia's file, noting the girl's deportation order had been expedited. "We have 48 hours, Aisha told Maria, her voice steady but urgent. "We'll file an emergency stay and request a hearing." As Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face, Aisha's phone buzzed with a text from a colleague. "Check X. Crockett's getting roasted." Aisha opened the app, scrolling through the vitriol. "She's ignoring the border crisis," one post read. "Hypocrite," said another. But buried in the noise was a thread from a local activist group, sharing Sophia's story and tagging Crockett. "This is what she's fighting for," the post read, with a photo of Sophia's drawing, the house with the red roof. Aisha showed it to Maria, who clutched the phone like a lifeline. "That's my Sophia," she whispered. Aisha made a mental note to contact Crockett's office. Maybe the Congresswoman could amplify Sophia's case, turn the viral spotlight into something useful. In Washington, D.C., the Capitol buzzed with the budget bill's final negotiations. Representative Mark Harris, a North Carolina Republican, sat in a conference room, his laptop open to the End Wokeness post. He'd commented on it earlier, jabbing at Crockett for her hypocrisy. Harris wasn't a firebrand like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who'd called Crockett a campaign ad, but he believed in Trump's plan. The border was a mess. Decades of lax enforcement had let cartels and smugglers run rampant, he argued. The $1,000 asylum fees and new ICE officers were necessary, even if the optics were rough. Harris had voted against Crockett's amendment, not because he wanted to deport citizens, but because he saw it as a loophole for delaying deportations. Still, the Delgado case, now circulating on X, was a PR nightmare. A U.S. citizen child deported? That wasn't the plan he'd signed up for. Harris's aide slid a memo across the table. Homeland Security had issued a statement clarifying Sophia's case. Her mother had chosen to take her, they said. Harris frowned. The public wouldn't buy it, not with Crockett's video framing it as a GOP power grab. He typed a quick message to his staff. "Get me a briefing on the Delgado case. We need to get ahead of this." As he hit send, he glanced at the TV in the corner, where Fox News was replaying Crockett's clip. "Am I telling a lie, Shiki?" demanded, her eyes blazing. Harris shook his head. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't telling the whole story either. The South Texas detention center smelled of bleach and despair. Sophia Delgado sat on a metal bench in the juvenile holding area, her backpack clutched to her chest. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the concrete floor. At 12, Sophia was old enough to understand she was in trouble, but too young to grasp why. She'd been separated from her mother after the raid, shuffled between holding rooms, and given a scratchy blanket that smelled like someone else's. Fear. Her only comfort was the stub of a pencil she'd found in her bag, which she used to sketch on the back of a crumpled intake form. She drew the house with the red roof again, adding a sun in the corner, its rays jagged from her trembling hand. "Mama says we're going to Honduras," she whispered to herself, testing the word. It sounded like a planet, not a place. A guard approached, her boots echoing. "Delgado Sophia," she called, checking a clipboard. "You've got a visitor." Sophia's heart leaped. Maybe it was her mother. But the guard led her to a small room where a woman in a blazer sat at a table. Aisha Khan introduced herself, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm your lawyer, Sophia. I'm here to help you stay in Texas." Sophia nodded, unsure what a lawyer could do. Aisha slid a granola bar across the table, a small gesture that made Sophia's eyes well up. "Can you tell me about your mom?" Aisha asked. Sophia hesitated, then spoke in a rush, about their apartment with the leaky sink, her school's art club, the way her mom braided her hair every Sunday. Aisha listened, jotting notes, her mind racing. Sophia's testimony could bolster their case for a stay of deportation, but time was slipping away. The expedited order meant Sophia could be on a plane by tomorrow. As Aisha questioned Sophia, Rep. Jasmine Crockett was pacing her Dallas office, her phone pressed to her ear. She was on the line with a local activist, Carla Mendoza, who'd posted Sophia's drawing on X. "Jasmine, this case could be a turning point," Carla said. "People are sharing Sophia's story, but we need you to amplify it. Hold a press conference, call out ICE, get the public on her side." Jasmine hesitated. She'd learned the hard way that going viral could backfire. Her Governor Hot Wheels comment had cost her allies, and her jab at Elon Musk had sparked a flood of harassment. But Sophia's case was different. This wasn't about scoring points. It was about a kid who'd drawn a house she might never see again. "All right," Jasmine said. "Set it up for tomorrow morning. I want Maria Delgado there, and I want Aisha Khan to speak." She hung up, her resolve hardening. She'd face the trolls if it meant saving Sophia. Across the city, Daniel Carter clocked into his shift at the detention center, his stomach churning. He'd seen Sophia's file again today, flagged for expedited removal. His supervisor had shrugged it off. "The mom wants her kid with her. What's the issue?" But Daniel couldn't shake the unease. He'd grown up in a border town, his Mexican-American mother teaching him to respect the law, but also to question it. "La ley no siempre es justa," she'd say. "The law isn't always just." Now, as he walked the detention center's sterile halls, Sophia's drawing haunted him. He passed the juvenile wing, catching a glimpse of her through a window, talking to a woman in a blazer. Was that her lawyer? Daniel's radio crackled with an order to prepare a group for transport, including Sophia. He gripped the radio, his thumb hovering over the reply button. For the first time in years, he considered disobeying. In Washington, Rep. Mark Harris sat in his office, the Delgado case memo in hand. Homeland Security's explanation that Sophia's mother had chosen to take her felt flimsy. The optics were disastrous, especially with Crockett's video gaining traction. Harris had supported Trump's deportation plan for its focus on security, but deporting a U.S. citizen child wasn't part of the deal. His aide, a sharp 20-something named Ethan, suggested a counter-move. "We could issue a statement, clarify the policy, and push for a review of cases involving citizens. It shows we're listening without caving to Crockett." Harris nodded, but his gut told him it wouldn't be enough. The X posts were relentless, with Carter Save Sophia trending alongside clips of Crockett's speech. He called a contact at ICE, requesting details on Sophia's case. "I need to know if this is a one-off or a pattern," he said. The answer would shape his next move. That evening, Maria Delgado stood in her sister's cramped living room, surrounded by neighbors and activists. Carla Mendoza had organized a vigil for Sophia, and the room buzzed with quiet determination. Maria held Sophia's drawing, her voice breaking as she spoke. "My daughter loves this country. She wants to be an artist, to paint houses like this. One." The group murmured support, some wiping tears. Aisha was there too, her laptop open as she drafted the emergency stay. She'd spoken to Crockett's office, confirming Maria's role in the press conference. "We're building momentum," Aisha told Maria. "But we need to be ready for pushback. The other side will say you're using Sophia to stay." Maria's jaw tightened. "I'd give anything to keep her safe," she said. Aisha believed her, but she knew the courts wouldn't care about love. They cared about evidence. By midnight, Dallas was alive with whispers of Sophia's story. On X, the Hawks Save Sophia hashtag had exploded, with thousands sharing her drawing and Crockett's video. But the backlash was fierce. Conservative commentators accused Crockett of exploiting the case, while others claimed Sophia's deportation was her mother's fault. In the detention center, Daniel Carter sat in the break room, scrolling through the posts. A colleague leaned over, smirking. "That congresswoman's gonna get us all fired," he said. Daniel didn't laugh. He thought of his daughter, asleep, at home, and of Sophia, probably awake in her cell. He made a decision. He'd slip Sophia's lawyer a note about the transport order. It was a risk, but he couldn't live with himself otherwise. The next morning, the press conference was set outside Dallas City Hall. Jasmine Crockett stood at a podium, flanked by Maria, Aisha, and Carla. The crowd was a mix of supporters, reporters, and a few hecklers waving Trump flags. Jasmine gripped the podium, her voice steady. Sofia Delgado is an American citizen, born in Houston, Texas. She's not a criminal, not a threat. She's a child who deserves to stay in her home. She gestured to Maria, who stepped forward, holding Sophia's drawing. "This is my daughter's dream," Maria said, her voice trembling. "Please don't take it away." Aisha spoke next, outlining the legal fight. "We filed an emergency stay, but we need public pressure to stop this deportation." The crowd cheered, but the hecklers shouted back, "Build the wall!" Jasmine ignored them, her eyes locked on a TV camera. She knew this moment could define her career, or end it. In the detention center, Daniel watched the press conference on a break room TV, his note to Aisha hidden in his pocket. He'd written the transport time, 3 p.m. today, and a warning. They're rushing her case. He didn't know Aisha, but he'd seen her with Sophia yesterday. As the conference ended, he slipped into the juvenile wing, pretending to check a log. Aisha was there meeting Sophia again. Daniel caught her eye, slid the note under a clipboard, and nodded. Aisha frowned, then picked it up. Her eyes widened as she read it. She didn't know who Daniel was, but she knew this was a lifeline. She thanked Sophia, promising to see her soon, and hurried out to call Crockett's office. The transport was in 6 hours. They had to act fast. In Washington, Mark Harris watched the press conference on Fox News, his aide Ethan at his side. "She's turning this into a circus," Ethan said. Harris didn't respond. The memo from ICE had arrived. Sophia's case wasn't unique. At least a dozen citizen children had been deported with non-citizen parents in the past month. Harris felt a chill. He'd voted for the budget bill to secure the border, not to exile kids. He called his ICE contact again. "Hold the Delgado transport," he said. "I want a review." It was a small move, but it might buy time. He didn't trust Crockett's motives, but he couldn't ignore Sophia's face, now plastered across every news channel. The clock was ticking. Aisha Khan raced from the detention center to her office, Daniel's note crumpled in her hand. The transport order for Sofia Delgado, 3 p.m. today, was a ticking bomb. She called Rep. Jasmine Crockett's office, her voice urgent. "They're moving Sophia in 6 hours. We need to escalate this now." Jasmine, still reeling from the press conference, didn't hesitate. "I'm calling every contact I have in Homeland Security," she said. "Get me something I can use, a legal angle, a precedent, anything." Aisha nodded, though Jasmine couldn't see it, and hung up. She pulled up her laptop, her fingers flying as she drafted a revised motion for the emergency stay. The note, from the unknown ICE officer, Daniel, though she didn't know his name, was a godsend. It confirmed the rushed timeline, which could argue procedural misconduct. Aisha worked through lunch, her coffee growing cold, fueled by the image of Sophia's drawing, the house with the red roof. At the detention center, Daniel Carter kept his head down, his heart pounding. Slipping Aisha the note had been a gamble. If his supervisor found out, he'd be fired, maybe worse. But as he processed paperwork for the transport group, He overheard two colleagues grumbling about the press conference. "That Congresswoman's gonna make us the bad guys," one said. "Kid's a citizen, though," the other muttered. "Feels wrong." Daniel stayed silent, but their words gave him hope. Maybe he wasn't alone in questioning the policy. He glanced at the juvenile wing, where Sophia was likely packing her few belongings. He'd never spoken to her, but he felt tethered to her fate. His radio crackled. "Carter, check the transport list." He complied, his hands steady but his mind racing. If Aisha acted fast, maybe Sophia wouldn't be on that bus. In Washington, Reppers Mark Harris sat in a Capitol Hill meeting room, the ICE briefing spread before him. The data was grim. 14 citizen children deported in the past month, all tied to non-citizen parents. The policy was meant to streamline removals, but it was a legal gray zone and the public was noticing. Sophia's case, amplified by Crockett's press conference and the Bikers Save Sophia hashtag, was a political landmine. Harris's aide, Ethan, urged caution. "We can't look soft on immigration, but we can't defend deporting kids either." Harris nodded, his mind made up. He dialed his ICE contact again. "The Delgado transport is on hold, correct?" he asked. The contact confirmed. "Yes, sir. We're reviewing it." Harris leaned back, relieved but wary. He didn't trust Crockett's grandstanding, but he couldn't ignore the human cost. He drafted a statement for release. "I'm calling for a full review of deportation protocols involving U.S. citizen minors. We secure our borders, but we don't exile our own." Back in Dallas, the press conference had ignited a firestorm. By noon, local news vans lined the streets outside City Hall, and the Bikers Save Sophia hashtag was trending. Nationally, Maria Delgado stood in her sister's apartment, watching the coverage on a borrowed laptop. Neighbors and activists packed the room, their phones buzzing with updates. Carla Mendoza, the activist who'd posted Sophia's drawing, was coordinating with Crockett's team, relaying Aisha's legal updates. "They're holding the transport," Carla announced, reading a text from Jasmine's aide. Maria gasped, clutching Sophia's drawing. "Does that mean she's safe?" she asked. Carla hesitated. "It means we have time. Aisha's filing a new motion, and Jasmine's pressuring Homeland Security." Maria nodded, her hope fragile but alive. She hadn't seen Sophia in days, but she could feel her daughter's presence in the drawing's jagged lines. At 2:30 p.m., Aisha submitted the revised motion to the federal court, citing Daniel's note as evidence of procedural haste. She argued that Sophia's deportation violated due process, given her citizenship and lack of criminal record. The judge, a no-nonsense Texan named Clara Ruiz, agreed to an emergency hearing at 4 p.m., after the transport deadline. Aisha called Jasmine, who was in her office, fielding calls from reporters. "We've got a hearing," Aisha said. "Can you get Maria there?" Jasmine didn't pause. "I'll drive her myself." She grabbed her keys, texting Carla to meet them at the courthouse. The press would be there, and Jasmine knew it. This wasn't about optics anymore, it was about Sophia. At the detention center, Daniel's shift was ending when his supervisor called him over. "Transport's on hold," the supervisor said, eyeing him. "Some lawyer's making noise. You know anything about it?" Daniel shook his head, his pulse racing. "Just doing my job, sir." The supervisor grunted and walked away. Daniel exhaled, slipping out to the parking lot. He checked X on his phone, seeing Bikers Save Sophia posts flood his feed. A local news clip showed Crockett at the press conference, her voice fierce. "Sophia Delgado is an American citizen. She deserves to stay." Daniel felt a pang of pride, though he'd never admit it. He'd crossed a line today, but for the first time in years he felt like he'd done something right. The courthouse was a circus by 4 p.m. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing as Jasmine and Maria arrived. Aisha met them inside, her briefcase stuffed with case law and Sophia's file. Maria clutched Sophia's drawing, her hands trembling. "Will I see her today?" she asked. Aisha's voice was steady. "Let's focus on winning this." Inside the courtroom, Judge Ruiz listened as Aisha presented the case, her argument sharp. Sophia's citizenship, the rushed transport, the lack of a hearing, all pointed to a violation of rights. The government's attorney, a weary man named Paul Grayson, countered that Sophia's deportation was tied to her mother's status and voluntary. The mother chose to take her, Grayson said, echoing Homeland Security's line. Aisha shot back. Sophia is not property. She's a citizen with her own rights. Maria's eyes filled with tears, and Jasmine, seated behind her, squeezed her shoulder. Judge Ruiz leaned forward, her gaze piercing. I'm troubled by the lack of due process here, she said. A citizen child deserves a hearing, regardless of her parents' status. She granted the stay, halting Sophia's deportation pending a full review. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Maria sobbed, hugging Aisha. Jasmine exhaled, her phone already buzzing with notifications. The ruling was a victory, but it wasn't the end. Sophia was still in detention, and Maria's case loomed. Outside, Jasmine faced the cameras, her voice steady. This is a step toward justice for Sofia Delgado and every child caught in this system. We won't stop fighting. Maria stood beside her, holding Sophia's drawing, her face a mix of relief and resolve. That evening, Reper Mark Harris watched the news from his D.C. office, the courthouse clip playing on loop. Judge Ruiz's ruling was a blow to the deportation plan's momentum, but Harris saw an opportunity. He called a meeting with moderate Republicans, proposing a bipartisan amendment to clarify protections for citizen minors. We can secure the border and protect our own, he told them. Some scoffed, citing Trump's base, but others nodded. Harris knew it was a long shot, but Sophia's case had shifted something in him. He didn't agree with Crockett's tactics, but he couldn't deny her impact. Save Sophia had forced his hand, and he wasn't sorry. At the detention center, Sophia was moved to a temporary holding area, her deportation on hold. A guard slipped her a new pencil, a small kindness. She started a new drawing, the house with the red roof, now with a girl standing in the doorway. She didn't know about the courtroom or the hashtag, but she felt a shift, like the air was lighter. In Dallas, Maria sat with Carla and Aisha, planning the next steps, a hearing for Sophia's release, a fight for Maria's status. Aisha warned, it would be tough, but Maria was undeterred. Sophia's my home, she said. I'll fight for her. Jasmine Crockett returned to her office, the day's events a blur. Her phone was flooded with messages, support, hate, and everything in between. She opened X, seeing Sophia's drawing shared thousands of times. A new post from Carla caught her eye. Thank you, Rep. Crockett, for fighting for Sophia. This is what leadership looks like. Jasmine smiled, though she knew the backlash would continue. She'd made enemies today, but she'd also made a difference. She thought of her grandmother's words, speak truth, even when it hurts. For Sophia, it was worth it. Daniel Carter drove home, the radio off. He didn't know if Sophia would stay, but he'd played his part. His daughter's drawing was still on the fridge when he walked in, a reminder of why he'd acted. He'd broken protocol, but he'd sleep tonight. In Washington, Harris finalized his amendment, knowing it might fail but determined to try. And in Dallas, Aisha worked late, her desk a mess of papers, her heart full. Sophia's case wasn't over, but it had cracked open a door, for her, for others, for change. The house with the red roof lived on, in Sophia's pencil lines and in the fight that had rallied a city. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, but it was a beginning.